Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. This is TheSketchMonkey here. I'm back here at McDonald Mazda outside of Denver to have a look at a car that I think is one of the best looking small hatchbacks on sale today. And this is of course the Mazda 3, the 2023 model year. So what we're gonna do in this video is have a look at this gorgeous Kodo design philosophy that we have going on all across this car, from the front, side, and rear, the interior, and then we're gonna take it for a drive. Let's have a look at some of the basic spec and tech of this 2023 Mazda 3. You have a 2.5 liter inline 4 putting out 186 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque. It's all-wheel drive connected to a 6-speed manual transmission. 0 to 60 is done in about 6.9 seconds. Fuel economy sits as 23 city, 31 highway, and the pricing for this is around $30,000. Starting with the front end design of Mazda. Mazda right now, I think they are absolutely crushing it when it comes to design, and the Mazda 3 is no different. Even though it has been out for a while now, it was kind of the beginning, or the MX-5 was the beginning of this new design language that we have from Mazda, with these big fluid lines intersected by a few sharp lines and key graphics, and that's what's going on in the front end as well. I'm not sure if this pulsating indicator is coming up on the camera, but it looks really cool. And it is, of course, full LED adaptive headlights here, so when you turn the wheels, the headlights themselves are also going to turn with the inputs of the wheels. And down here we have this gorgeous chamfer going in here, and I absolutely love this red color. This is the spec that I would choose for my Mazda 3 if I were buying one today. This spec, and I would actually pick the black wheels for this car. What I love about the front end graphics of the Mazda 3 is that we have a functional air vent down here. So there's no fake air vents going on here. Yes, a part of the grille is covered up, but most of it is actually functional. And I also like this grille pattern because it's the same congruent grille pattern across the entire width of the grille. No crazy styling with some black pieces going on inside of the grille, and I think it just cleans up the design overall. We gotta talk about this hood design and the line flow that follows this car into the front end. Just have a look at this stunning simple line that goes across the entire hood from the A-pillar all the way down and connects to the corner of the grille. I also like that this is blacked out now. Instead of having this be chrome, it looks a lot better with the gloss black that we have here. And you have the same framing for the light going here into the framing of the grille. So it's in one single section carved out of the front end of the car. And I also like the lower splitter that we have here. It creates some contrast and kind of hugs the ground by having this splitter in the front end. Now, coming around to the side view of the Mazda 3, and this is where it gets really interesting for me, because this is where you can clearly see this Kodo design philosophy. So what exactly is Kodo design philosophy that Mazda is applying on their cars right now? It's all about the beauty of empty surfaces and the play with the light within these empty surfaces. So there is not a single panel on this car that is actually flat. Everything has a small curvature to it, and again, it's intersected by a couple of key lines, and in this case we have that line going at the bottom, creating a nice base for the rest of the fluid motion and volumes that we have up top. So what do we have when we talk about wheel and tire setup? They are pretty small, these wheels. I do kind of like that they're blacked out because we have a connection to the front end and the rear end graphics, but they're 18-inch, 215 width all around. So I would probably want to have these in maybe 19-inch, just extend them by an inch or two, maybe, I'm not sure. Gotta have to play around with that, but I kind of like the black. Might try out some different wheels on this and definitely add some width to the wheels, tires itself, because 215 is very, very narrow and it doesn't help the plantedness of this car. One detail we have to talk about in the side view of this car before we jump in and look at the rear is this C-pillar. And another key feature that is missing on the Mazda 3 is that we don't have any sort of shoulder line. And I think that's very interesting because it's very uncommon today to not have any sort of line being sharp here, and that creates this big volume right here, which is exactly in line with Mazda's design philosophy. It's not going to help the passenger visibility out of the rear seats, but in this case I don't care because it looks so good. I'm glad that some manufacturers are still prioritizing surfaces and volumes, proportions looking good over having 100% function. What I mean by that is Mazda could have extended this line to go further down and further back and then up to have more window surface, but it wouldn't look as good as it does in the Mazda 3. And that's one detail that I've heard a lot of complaints about, is this rear section and the rear visibility. But for me, I prefer to have it like this. All right, so coming around to the rear end of the 2023 Mazda 3, I don't know which is my favorite view for this car, because I think the front end with the graphics, the headlights going into the same framing of the grille, and the side view with the C-pillar and lack of shoulder line, and this rear, they all look very, very good. You can see just how fluid and bubbly this shape is right here. No sharp angles or lines in this section of the car, but we do have the bumper down here being pretty sharp, and it feels like the trunk has been pushed in and carved out this mass of the trunk. I think it's a gorgeous looking rear end with the same type of black trim that we have in the front end, and in the side we also have that coming back here in this, I wouldn't call this a diffuser, maybe a diffuser slash bumper. And then we also have the chrome tipped tailpipes, which again I think it suits this car, because look at the lower section of the greenhouse. We do have some chrome going down there, and the top part being black. We also have the chrome logo in the front end. So having a couple of splashes of chrome here, I think it actually suits this design. Now, coming back to these taillights here, I just want to do a close-up on these because I think they look really great with this outline that we have here for the smaller circle, and then he bends down and carves out a little bit of the rear surface for the bigger circle of lights. And I know this light is flickering on the camera, but in real life it's actually pulsating more, and I think that's a unique feature for the Mazdas to implement something cool and different into the indicator light. A couple of interesting details when you look at the rear view and the proportions of this thing. Just have a look at the sloping angle of this rear window. It's almost flat into the roof itself. We also have this spoiler back here. One thing I do wish that Mazda would have done here, I know it's not possible because this wing is pretty small, it's not gonna fit under there, but I would like to remove this piece, this wiper, and have it installed underneath here, because the rest of the rear end is so clean that it doesn't make sense to have this little piece just stick out like it does here. But I understand why they did it, and a lot of small hatchbacks also has the same solution for the rear end. Welcome to the interior of the 2023 Mazda 3. You have the 2.5 liter inline 4 with 181 horsepower. They do have a turbo version as well, but that does not come with this little thing here, the 6-speed manual. So I'm glad I get to review the manual today. Let's fire it up because it's getting a little toasty in here. So the thing about this interior is that it is very simplistic. There is nothing crazy or unusual going on here, except for, I would say, the integration of this infotainment screen up here. It sits on its little own separate beach up here and has some mountain ridges behind it. And the styling of this thing is very interesting as well. You have a different angle on the right side than you have on the left side. And the thing is, this is not a touchscreen, so you have to use this dial down here to adjust whatever you want in here. And I guess this will take a little bit of getting used to, but it doesn't seem to be that crazy to learn how to use. And it's also 8.8 inches, I believe, 8.8 or something like that. And the thing is, it doesn't extend to the very corners of the housing for it. So they could have made it maybe, I don't know, 10-inch screen to have it cover the whole width of the housing for it, but they decided to make it like this, and it's not a big deal. 8.8 inches, it looks pretty good, the graphics inside of it, and I'm not complaining about it. Maybe this is easier to use than a touchpad because it's sitting pretty far away from, you know, poking it while you're driving. And I also like the housing that we have for the infotainment screen as well. You do have some pretty soft touch material up here. It's also not the softest, but it gets a lot softer when you move down to this level of the dash. And I also like these integrations of the vents. Very simplistic, two parallel lines which houses all the information that you need and all the settings that you want to adjust and so on. The climate control has, of course, dials to it and knobs for on and off. You have the fan speed plus and minus, super simple. Let's turn the AC on. You also have the heated seats in 3 different levels and the hazard button right here. Moving further down on the center console, you do have a pad here. This is not wireless charging though, so it's just a pad to store stuff. You have 2 cup holders and this manual transmission, which feels pretty good. It's going to be interesting to see how this feels to drive when we take it out for a spin in just a minute. The gear shifter itself looks nice with the chrome top and the leather stitched. I think this is leather on the sides here, and it's pretty short as well, which I like. And on the side here you have the parking brake, auto hold. You have this dial for the infotainment screen like we talked about, navigation. Let's go into that and see what that looks like. Pretty decent. And on the right side of this dial you do have the controls for the audio settings and the radio. Moving further back here, you have this leather wrapped center armrest which you can slide back and forth like this, and when you open it up you do have a wireless charging in here. But the thing is, if you have your phone in here, it's definitely going to be sliding around because there's nothing in here to hold your phone in place right over the charging pad. Then you have 2 regular USBs and you also have a 12-volt cigarette outlet. Up top, we do have a standard size sunroof with the controls for it right here in the middle, and you have somewhere to put your shade. Moving along to the seats, these look very, very standardized seats. They feel great to sit in, and I'm sure they're very comfortable even on long road trips because they're not too aggressive and they're also not too soft, so they do have some stiffness to them. And I do like the design. There's something special about it, but we do have some contrast stitching with this bronze stitching on the side compared to the black leather, which looks really good. Now, moving on to the gauge cluster. It has a gorgeous housing to it with a lot of styling going on. Very simplistic, reminds me of the outside of this Mazda 3 with the surfacing. And the center portion of this gauge cluster is digital, so you have some safety features displayed right in the middle. To the right side you do have an analog fuel gauge and temperature gauge, and to the left you have the tachometer. It's a pretty basic layout, and honestly it kind of feels refreshing to have just circular gauges in the gauge cluster itself. You still have a digital display right in the middle of it. This steering wheel looks decent as well with some chrome trim, which again I feel like this car suits to have a little bit of chrome in it, and we have that going here around the buttons on the right side, which you have the controls for the cruise control, and on the left side you have the controls for the radio and the voice command. Same design, of course, on the left side that we have on the right, and the chrome extends further down here to the third spoke as well. Very tiny little small center portion of this. Looks like a cake or something. Looks pretty good, but it is pretty hard plastic that this steering wheel is made of, except for the areas that you're going to touch it, of course. It also feels a little thin. On the left side of the gauge cluster, you do have these vents on both the left and the right side, and you have the controls for the memory seats and the traction control off. Moving on to the door panels, I think the doors themselves are very nicely sculpted, with simplicity being the key feature here. You still have some chrome graphics in the doors, and you also have the Bose sound system with the perforated holes in it, looking really nice, with the contrast stitching that we have in the seats as well coming back in the doors. Last but not least, up front here we do have a big glove box for a small hatchback. I'm pretty impressed by that. So with that said, let's jump into the back and let's check out the space back there. All right, jumping into the back seat of the Mazda 3, and I can see that this passenger seat is just a little bit further forward than my own driving position. I still have decent leg room here, and I do have a pocket on this side. So the passenger side gets a pocket in the seat in front of them, but not on the driver's side. Very interesting solution to only put a pocket in one seat back here. Up top, there's really not a lot to talk about, and here you can see just how deep this slopes down. And if I close this door here, have a look at this, just how high up this line goes. It feels a little tight with just this small window back here, but honestly it feels cozy as well. I kind of like it. In the middle here, there's absolutely nothing to talk about. It's all hard plastic in the centerpiece. There's no controls for any vents or anything like that. Very, very basic here in the back, but still I have room and I'm 6'1". Alrighty guys, setting off in the 2023 Mazda 3 with the manual transmission. We do have a 2.5 liter inline 4 up front with 181 horsepower, so not the most powerful version of this car. You do have the turbo as well, but the thing with the turbo though, I would like to drive it, but the thing is, it doesn't come with a manual transmission, and that just does not make sense to me at all. I don't understand why they wouldn't put this same transmission in a the turbo version. It's just a very weird decision, but we do have it here, and I really enjoy it so far. It feels very snappy and good to use. Maybe a little loose in getting the shifts in and around the shifts, but once you're in them, it feels pretty tight. 0 to 60 in this thing is 6.9 seconds, so it's not the fastest car, but again, I don't think that really matters in this Mazda 3. I don't think it's a competitor to the Golf GTI specifically. I think the GTI is a little bit more tuned towards sport, and this is not. This is more of a cruiser car or a daily driver that you can take from one point to the other, and that's about it. But other than that, the interior in here looks nice. I really like this interior. There's nothing crazy going on about it, except for what we talked about, and that is this integration and the design, the styling itself of the infotainment screen. It's a very unique styling, and I kind of like that they did it this way to make it a little bit more unique. However, what Mazda does really, really well in this car is the design of this thing. It's by far one of the best looking small hatchbacks out there, in my opinion, with this Kodo design language that we have, meaning simple surfaces, nothing is really flat, everything has a curvature to it, creating these very interesting volumes, specifically when the sun is hitting the surfaces. This fluid design in Mazda that I absolutely love, and that they have now across their entire lineup. All right, so let's floor it here and let's see what this 181 horsepower inline 4 can do. Up to the red line, flooring it. It's still a pretty fun car to drive. It is front wheel drive. You can't, I'm not sure if you can get this one with all wheel drive, but the turbo comes as an all wheel drive version, which is fantastic. And overall, it's a fun little car to drive. Huge thanks to McDonald Mazda here in Denver for providing this vehicle for me to review for you guys today. If you're interested in this, go and check it out in the link in the description. I'm gonna link the full inventory there as always. And thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.